Hey everyone, so One Piece chapter 1049 just came out and the raid succeeded. Just kidding, it probably didn't. It might have, but it probably didn't. So, let's get this stuff out of the way because this is the type of chapter where I have to talk a little bit about raid succeeding, failing, etc. before I can get into my general thoughts on the chapter. So, as a reminder, in my chapter 1048 review, which you can find on the March Archives channel, the three things I thought would happen this chapter are Luffy probably wins the clash, Kaido's flashback begins, and Momonosuke moves Onigashima out of the way. Those are basically exactly what happened. This chapter was not a surprise. This is what was expected to happen. Luffy was probably going to win this clash. The question is, did Luffy put Kaido down for good? Now, for a long time now, for many videos, I think I've been saying that Kaido's flashback and after the flashback is really where any sort of reversal would happen, and that most likely we would get to a point where it seems as though Luffy has won. That would be the point where Kaido's flashback begins, and from then on we could expect a turning point. So nothing that's happening so far is out of the ordinary or unexpected. Obviously, if Kaido's flashback does not continue and he is basically shown to be permanently defeated in the next two chapters, then that theory is totally wrong. But at the moment, this is playing out basically how you would probably expect it to play out if Oda is going for a reversal, which is hero seems like he's about to win, villain gets his flashback, villain turns things around. So let's wait and see. I think in the next two chapters or so, I would say probably two chapters. Within the next two chapters, we can probably get to some sort of concluding point where we know if it's going one way or another, right? By that I mean either Kaido's flashback picks up again in the next two chapters, in which case we can expect something more, and we can expect things to go on a little bit longer, and we can expect probably something interesting to happen at the end of that flashback. Or there is no continuation to Kaido's flashback. This chapter was all we got, and that means that the raid is over, the alliance won, etc. So in two chapters, if we do not pick up Kaido's flashback again, at that point I will, yes, of course, say I was wrong, I admit I was wrong, blah blah blah, concede, etc. The reason I say two chapters and not one chapter is because Oda may very well do a thing where for one chapter he makes it appear as though everything is, good, fine, happy, they all won, etc., and then continues to pick up Kaido's flashback in the next chapter, leading to something more interesting. So, two chapters I think is fair. I doubt Oda would drag things on and leave things ambiguous for more than two chapters. So, in the next two chapters, let's make that very clear, if Kaido's flashback does not pick up in the next two chapters, or there's no indication of something more within the next two chapters, then we're done. The raid did in fact succeed. I don't think that's the case. I'll probably save my arguments for that for another video and not bore you guys with that, probably for next Friday's video. Yeah, next Friday's video, I think that makes sense. But I'm not going to bore you guys with that here. In this video, I think I'm just going to talk about the three main points from this chapter. Well, really one main point from this chapter, which is Kaido himself and what we learned about Kaido himself over the course of this chapter, because I think that was by far the most interesting thing. That's actually not true. The most interesting thing by far was what Luffy said. What Luffy said was by far the most interesting point to come out of this chapter, and actually it really, the statement that he made this chapter recontextualizes so much of the series. That's a video that is coming out next Tuesday. So I want to do that before I talk about the raid, blah, 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 because I think that's a very important video to put out. Whether you think raid's going to succeed, fail, whatever you think, all right? Next Tuesday's video, I think, is a very interesting video because it goes into a side of Luffy that I think we just got a major revelation on. And I do think that it's something very important and very interesting to discuss because there's so much of the series that we can go back and look at now with a new lens based on what Luffy just said. So, Luffy video coming soon. I'm not going to talk about Luffy here. I could talk about Momonosuke. Not much to talk about, really. Let's just put this into perspective, which is that out of the gigantic cast of characters in Wano, about 50, God knows how many characters, right? 20, 30, 50 characters or something along those lines. This is a huge cast of characters. Among maybe 50 characters in Wano, there's only one character who actually had a significant character arc in these 140, 50 chapters or so. Only one character that there was any time devoted to actually having a notable character arc. That was Momonosuke. So you could say that Momonosuke was basically carrying the entirety of Wano's character-driven storytelling throughout this storyline. So you could say that if this is how the single character arc of note in Wano wrapped up, with maybe 3-4 panels this chapter, and that was what this entire character arc was leading up to, you could say, well, I'll let you guys fill in the blanks of what you could say about that. if that truly is the case. Luckily, I don't believe that's the case. I don't believe we're done with Momonosuke yet. If we are done with Momonosuke, and that was the conclusion to it, I'll let you guys fill in the blanks. So, we're going to move on to the really interesting part of the chapter that was not Luffy, because I'm going to talk about that later, and it was not Momo, because there's nothing to talk about, and that's Kaido. So, I liked what we're getting out of the Kaido flashback. I think that there's still like a million questions to answer out of his flashback, just because the questions and ideas that he raised throughout this arc, that were hinted at and teased at throughout this arc, those were not really addressed for the most part within his flashback. But there is one thing that was basically addressed, which is Kaido's desire for, and again, we might get further clarification on this, but it seems like Kaido's, like the very first statement he comes out and makes as a character in chapter 795, which is he wants to start the biggest war the world has ever seen, right? And once he starts moving Onigashima, he starts talking about how he wants to create a pirate's paradise and he wants to begin creating a world of violence, right? These are things that Kaido has been saying throughout the arc since his introduction. So with this chapter, we finally got some insight into why that is, and it's actually very similar to how Big Mom seems to think, just coming at it from different perspectives. They both seem to actually value equality in a way, they just go about it very differently, and it's based on how they grew up in their formative experiences. So for example, with Big Mom, why does she want to create a world where everybody is equal? Well, that's because that's what Mother Carmel told her, right? Mother Carmel told her that that's right, a world where everyone can see eye to eye, etc. It's just that Big Mom was a kid when she got this information, and then Mother Carmel died of mysterious circumstances, so Big Mom just grew up with this really warped sense of what an equal world would mean. So one, gigantification, she wants everyone to be literally the same size and literally see eye to eye. But two, how is everybody going to be nice to each other? How is she going to make sure that everyone is kind and fair and equal? Well, she says that I will force them to. I will be the the benevolent, all-powerful ruler, the mighty queen, Big Mom. That's basically what she says multiple times throughout Whole Cake Island, both at the end of her flashback and during, I think, chapter 900, where she's going through that, hallucination and everything like that. So that's Big Mom's vision of an all-equal world. Basically, you would say like an authoritarian world where a all-powerful tyrant forces everyone to play nice and be equal and fair, right? So that's one idea. She would be a giant mother, right? That's interesting. Kaido's, on the flip side, is, well, Kaido, he didn't grow up with a figure like Mother Carmel. Kaido grew up in basically a war-torn land. Well, a lot of it was his own doing and trying to go seek out battle and everything like that, it seems like, or it's a little hard to tell. But Kaido did experience a lot of war, bloodshed, combat, etc. as a child. So that is all he saw, all that he knew. And he saw, it seems as though he saw the battlefield as a place where everyone is equal, right? So Kaido also doesn't like the idea of some people being above others. He doesn't like the idea of classes and everything like that. What he wants is basically a world of war, a world of violence, where the strongest survive, and that is fair, that is equal, where everybody's on the same playing field. So that was a really, really interesting insight into Kaido's character, and it matched up pretty nicely with what we got of Big Mom. And as we know, Kaido and Big Mom, excellent foils for each other. They both, I think it's, they both stand out as a sort of duo among the emperors, because there's far more similarities between those two and how they're portrayed and framed throughout the narrative compared to someone like Blackbeard, Shanks, even Whitebeard. So it's interesting that Oda's choosing to write the two of them like that. So I liked a lot of what we got out of Kaido there. Getting the reveals of Rox and stuff, whether or not it was Rox who was calling for Kaido, you guys know what I'm talking about. Rox was calling for Kaido to come over or whatever, or was it Big Mom? It was obviously someone wearing a hat. It's hard to say. I think it'd be really, really cool if Rox was the first wearer of that straw hat, but that wouldn't really make sense because Roger, we knew from the Rayleigh flashback, had the straw hat. But that is something I saw people toss around. I just thought about it for a second. It doesn't really make sense, does it? So I think at the very least with Kaido, we got some insight into one aspect of his motivation, why he wants to create a world of violence, right? So one aspect of his motivation. I think that's pretty interesting. I think everything else, why he wanted to come to Wano, why enslave Wano, what, like the pirates betraying, like there's so many things about Kaido's character that I've talked about in past videos that are still yet to be fleshed out. And I'm really, really looking forward to basically, well, obviously it might not happen, but I'm really, really looking forward to hopefully getting to see the Rox, glimpses of the Rox pirates with Kaido, glimpses of Kaido and the Oni race and his past with the Oni race, and maybe fleshing out what the hell Onigashima is, and even a bit of what where did Yamato come from, and finally glimpses of Kaido and his motivations coming into Wano, why he came to Wano, Was it just because he encountered this old hag randomly? Because he has implied multiple times before that Wano is something that he landed on as being important because he knew something about Wano that he had to act on. So there's a lot of things that we could look forward to in Kaido's flashback. Again, hopefully we get all of it. I personally think we do. I do believe that Oda is going to give us that, just based on how he's been doing flashbacks for recent villains like Doflamingo and Big Mom. But, again, wait and see. These next 2 chapters will be very, very interesting. And if you enjoyed this video, then definitely like, comment, and subscribe. And look out for my Tuesday video because that is a big one.